If you are a muscle car fan, you have probably heard of the Chevrolet 396 engine. The Chevrolet 396 engine has long been a legend in the world of muscle cars. But what if I told you there is more to this engine than meets the eye? Gearheads have praised its performance, while others whisper about its hidden flaws and unexpected twists in its history. From its rise as a street and strip monster to the controversies that left some enthusiasts scratching their heads, the story of the 396 is anything but simple. Buckle up as we dive into the shocking truth behind Chevy's infamous big block, because this engine's past is just as wild as the cars it powered. Before the Chevrolet 396 engine hit the streets, the muscle car scene was a very different world. Sure, there were powerful cars out there, but they didn't have the same kind of raw, big block power that would later define the late 60s and early 70s. Back then, most high-performance Chevys were running small block V8s, which were fast but didn't have the earth-shaking torque that would soon become the norm. Meanwhile, Ford and Chrysler were stepping up their game, introducing bigger and meaner engines, and Chevy knew they had to respond. The competition was heating up, and muscle car fans wanted more power, more speed, and bigger thrills. That's when Chevrolet decided it was time to unleash something special, something that would change the game. And that's where the 396 came in, bringing big block muscle to the masses and kicking off a whole new era of high-performance machines. It's the mid-1960s, and the American muscle car wars are in full swing. Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler are locked in a battle for horsepower dominance, each pushing the limits of engineering to create the most powerful engines on the track and the streets. Ford had its 427 FE, Chrysler had the 426 HEMI, and Chevrolet? They were cooking up something deadly in the shadows. In the middle of this fight, Chevrolet introduces the legendary 396 Big Block V8. The L78 variant, a high-performance beast, finds its way into some of the most iconic muscle cars of the era. The Camaro, the Chevelle, the El Camino, and even the Corvette, which, by the way, got the monstrous L88 427. But we will save that for another time. The 396 packed canted valve heads, an aggressive camshaft, and enough power to shake the pavement. But Chevy wasn't showing all its cards just yet, because behind the scenes, a more radical version was being developed. And then it disappeared. By 1963, GM had officially pulled out of factory-backed racing, but that didn't stop their engineers. Behind closed doors, away from corporate eyes, they were working on something monstrous, a high-performance variant of the 396 that, according to insiders, was too powerful for NASCAR to handle. Some say Chevrolet buried it to avoid breaking NASCAR's strict rules. Others whisper that it was quietly tested in underground racing circles, passed between a few lucky hands. And a few believe it never really disappeared at all, that it lived on in secret, hidden in plain sight. But was the 396 Porcupine engine truly outlawed? Or was there something even bigger going on? The truth is crazier than you think. In 1963, the sun has set over the Chevrolet factory, and in a dark alleyway, a small group of elite engineers huddle together. Flames flicker in a metal drum as stacks of documents disappear into the fire. General Motors has just pulled out of factory-backed racing, and they have ordered all projects related to high-performance development to be shut down. But one engineer isn't ready to let go. In the chaos, he salvages a single blueprint, one that details an experimental engine that was supposed to change everything. The 396th. They thought the Porcupine engine was dead. But deep in Detroit's underground, a shadow factory was already coming to life. By the mid-60s, Chevrolet was unstoppable. Drivers like Junior Johnson, David Pearson, and Buck Baker were racking up win after win, leaving the competition scrambling to keep up. But while the 396 was a beast, Chevrolet had something even bigger in mind, an engine that would change racing forever, the 427 Mystery Motor. This was the bigger, badder brother of the 396, designed for pure domination. When it hit the track, it was untouchable. NASCAR, already cracking down on experimental engines, wasn't happy. And Chevrolet? They knew they had to pick their battles. Instead of pushing the outlawed 396, Chevy made a game-changing decision. They went all in on the 427. It was a move that would cement their racing legacy and leave the 396 in the shadows. Although the 427 Mystery Motor and the 396 were technically from different engine families, they shared the same development DNA. Many of their groundbreaking features were born from the same race-bred engineering. But while the 427 Mystery engine was killed off by NASCAR's rule changes in '63, the 396 was just getting started. It became the foundation of an entire generation of big-block Chevy V8s. If there's one design breakthrough that carried over from the legendary 427 Mystery Motor to the 396 and every big-block Chevy 5V8 that followed, it was the unique canted valve cylinder head. This wasn't just a minor tweak. By angling the intake and exhaust valves relative to each cylinder, Chevrolet engineers were able to fit larger valve diameters and create straighter port angles. The result was a significantly improved airflow, better combustion efficiency, and an engine that could breathe deeper and rev harder. With the valve covers removed, the setup looked chaotic. Valves and rocker arms jutting out in every direction, like quills on a porcupine. And just like that, the Porcupine Head nickname was born. But as time went on, this engine family picked up another name, one that would go down in history: the Big Block. Unlike Chevy's original 1955 small block V8, this new powerhouse featured larger bore spacing and a taller deck height, giving it both the physical size and performance capability to dominate the muscle car wars. In early 1965, Chevrolet introduced 3 different versions of the 396 cubic inch V8. These engines were marketed under the name Turbo Jet V8 and quickly made their way into some of the most legendary muscle cars of the era. Meanwhile, the L78 was the performance king of the group. Designed for the Corvette and full-size Chevys, this beast packed 425 horsepower at 6,400 RPM. It was built for serious speed, featuring 4-bolt main caps for added strength, a Holley 4-barrel carburetor for maximum fuel delivery, an 11:1 compression ratio, and a solid lifter camshaft for high revving performance. This was no ordinary engine. It was a track-ready powerhouse, and it set the stage for the big block's dominance in the years to come. The L37 was essentially a slightly tamer version of the L78, developed specifically for the Z16 Chevelle SS, a rare, high-performance muscle car that Chevrolet built in extremely limited numbers. While it shared most of the same heavy-duty internals as the L78, the L37 had a milder hydraulic lifter camshaft, which gave it a more street-friendly power delivery and an official rating of 375 horsepower. Only 200 Z16 Chevelle were ever built, making this engine a rare gem in Chevrolet's performance history. To set it apart, Chevy dressed the engine bay with chrome valve covers and a chrome air cleaner lid, giving it a look as bold as its performance. However, for those who wanted big block power but didn't need track-ready aggression, Chevrolet introduced the L35, a more refined version designed for full-size cars like the Biscayne, Bel Air, and Impala. This engine featured a 10.25:1 compression ratio, a 325 horsepower rating, and a smoother, more streetable camshaft. It was the perfect blend of power and drivability, making big block performance accessible to everyday drivers. Though the 396 was just the first chapter in Chevrolet's big block saga, It laid the foundation for a performance dynasty. While the original 427 mystery motor may have been a secret weapon lost to time, its DNA lived on in the 396, and from there, the big block only grew stronger. By the time the dust settled, the big block Chevy had become one of the most legendary engine families in American muscle car history, with its influence still felt in the performance world today. By mid-1965, Chevrolet had unleashed the 396 cubic inch big block V8, but it wasn't produced in massive numbers, at least not at first. What it did do, however, was set the stage for a legendary family of engines. The 396 gave rise to an entire line of big block Chevy powerhouses, including the 427 cubic inch V8 in 1966 and beyond. By 1970, the displacement had grown to 454 cubic inches, and decades later, the big block evolved into the 8.1-liter 496 cubic inch Vortec, which found its home in Chevy trucks. But the story doesn't end there. The 396 was originally designed to be Chevrolet's next great production engine, offering a balance of high performance and mass appeal. But behind the scenes, rumors swirled about a more radical version, one that was supposedly too powerful for its time. If the whispers are to be believed, Chevrolet had an experimental high-performance variant of the 396 in development, one that pushed the limits of available technology. But before it could reach its full potential, it was sidelined without explanation. During the 1960s, Chevrolet was a dominant force in NASCAR thanks to its powerful big block engines. From the legendary 427 mystery motor to the later 427 Mark V big block L88, Chevy-powered stock cars were racking up wins and championships. The 396 Porcupine engine wasn't the star of the show, but it played a critical supporting role in Chevrolet's racing success. Its cutting-edge design and reliability helped cement Chevrolet's reputation as a builder of high-performance, race-winning engines. Some of NASCAR's biggest legends, including Junior Johnson, David Pearson, Ned Jarrett, and Buck Baker, drove Chevy-powered cars to victory. Junior Johnson won 13 races in 1965. David Pearson had a 15-win championship season in 1966, and Ned Jarrett secured 13 victories in 1967, 1965, and 1967. These wins were a testament to Chevrolet's engineering prowess. However, as the competition intensified, the 427 V8 took center stage. NASCAR's high-speed tracks demanded maximum displacement and power, and the 396 was ultimately overshadowed by its bigger brother. Meanwhile, NASCAR wasn't just about speed, it was about control. Strict homologation rules meant that if an engine wasn't in a production car, it wasn't allowed on the track. Chevrolet had already pushed the limits with the 427 mystery motor, and NASCAR took notice. So when rumors of a high-performance 396 began to surface, officials didn't hesitate. Some say NASCAR shut it down before it even had a chance to compete. Others believe Chevrolet pulled the plug themselves, knowing that the bigger, more race-ready 427 would be their golden ticket. But here's where things get really suspicious. Chevy had a history of downplaying their most powerful engines, keeping them under the radar, hiding their true capabilities. One of the biggest questions surrounding the 396 Porcupine engine is whether it was actually banned from racing. Some sources claim that NASCAR outlawed it outright before it had the chance to dominate, fearing that it would give Chevrolet an unfair advantage. Chevrolet had already faced scrutiny in 1963 with its experimental 427 mystery motor, a prototype that saw limited use in NASCAR but was never officially offered to the public. NASCAR, wary of manufacturers introducing cutting-edge technology that wasn't accessible to the average buyer, started cracking down on experimental engines. However, there is no concrete evidence that the 396 was specifically banned by NASCAR. Instead, what likely happened was a perfect storm of corporate strategy and evolving NASCAR regulations that prevented the 396 from ever becoming the dominant force it was meant to be. Rather than pushing the 396 for racing, Chevrolet shifted its focus to the 427, which better suited NASCAR's high-speed demands. Fierce competition from Ford's 427 FE and Chrysler's 426 Hemi also played a role in determining where Chevy concentrated its efforts. Despite never reaching its full potential in NASCAR, the 396 lived on as the foundation for some of the most iconic big block engines in muscle car history. It paved the way for Chevelle SS 396, Camaros, Corvettes, and full-size Chevys, and it set the stage for the big block legacy that followed. The 396 Porcupine may not have ruled NASCAR, but its impact on performance engineering and Chevrolet's dominance in the muscle car wars can still be felt to this day. If there was one thing muscle car fans know, it's that manufacturers played fast and loose with horsepower ratings back in the day, and Chevrolet, they were no exception. Officially, the L78 396 was rated at 375 horsepower, but real-world dyno tests? They tell a very different story. Some claim the engine was actually pushing over 425 horsepower, if not more. So, why the deception? Back then, a higher horsepower rating meant higher insurance premiums, which meant fewer buyers. Chevrolet didn't want that. They wanted to sell cars, not scare off customers. Moreover, General Motors had an internal rule that limited mid-size cars to a maximum of 400 cubic inches. If the 396 was making too much power, it might steal attention from the larger 427 and 454 big blocks, and Chevy wasn't about to cannibalize their own lineup. So, did Chevy intentionally underrate the 396 to stay within corporate guidelines? Or were they hiding its true potential to give racers an underground advantage? Either way, one thing is clear. The 396 was way more powerful than Chevrolet let on. The 396 should have been a legend. It had the power, the technology, and the reputation to be Chevy's ultimate street and track engine. But why didn't it reach its full potential? After General Motors officially pulled out of factory-backed racing, high-performance projects like the Radical 396 variant got pushed aside. As NASCAR tightened homologation rules, it became harder for experimental engines to get approved for competition. The 396 never got a fair shot at proving itself on the track. And as Chevy developed even bigger big blocks, the 396 was no longer the priority. The 427th stole the spotlight, followed by the monstrous 454, which became the king of the streets. Unlike the 427 Mystery motor, which was built for all-out racing dominance, the 396 Porcupine engine was designed with street performance in mind. But just because it wasn't built for NASCAR glory doesn't mean it wasn't a powerhouse. In fact, there's a long-standing rumor that Chevrolet wasn't entirely honest about just how powerful this engine really was. One of the biggest myths surrounding the L78 version of the 396 is that Chevrolet intentionally underrated its horsepower figures. On paper, the L78 was officially rated at 375 horsepower at 5,600 RPM and 415 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM. But insiders and dyno tests suggest a different story. Many believe it actually produced closer to 425 horsepower, if not more. And honestly, that wouldn't have been surprising. Back in the muscle car era, automakers often fudged horsepower numbers for two major reasons. Firstly, higher advertised horsepower meant sky-high insurance premiums for customers. To keep performance cars more affordable, manufacturers downplayed their true power. Secondly, General Motors had a corporate policy that limited mid-size cars to a maximum of 400 cubic inches. If the 396 was putting out too much power, Chevrolet may have intentionally underreported its output to comply with these restrictions, without actually sacrificing performance. Regardless of what the paperwork said, the L78-396 proved to be an absolute beast on the drag strip, often outperforming its official specs. It's no wonder enthusiasts believe Chevrolet was hiding the engine's true capabilities. The L78 wasn't just a high-output motor, it was a carefully engineered performance machine, featuring an aggressive solid-lifter camshaft for high revving power, an 11.0 to 1 compression ratio for maximum efficiency, a large rectangular port heads to improve airflow, a Holley 4-barrel carburetor for increased fuel delivery. Chevrolet marketed it under the Turbojet name, and it debuted in mid-1965 in high-performance models like the Corvette, full-size Impala, and select Chevelle SS models. In the Corvette, only 2,157 units were ever equipped with the L78, making it a rare and highly sought-after option. The Chevelle SS 396 Z16, another legendary performance machine, was even more exclusive. Only 201 units were ever built. Despite being one of the most powerful big blocks of its time, the 396 never quite achieved the legendary status of its 427 and 454 siblings. This is because the 427 and later 454 big blocks offered even more displacement and horsepower, naturally making them the go-to choices for hardcore performance enthusiasts. Moreover, GM's 400 cubic inch limit for mid-size cars kept the 396 as the top engine option for many models. But it also meant that Chevrolet couldn't push it any further without breaking corporate policy. As muscle cars evolved, Chevrolet's engineers focused more on maximizing displacement, leading to the dominance of the 427 and 454 in the late 60s and early 70s. Though the 396 never became the king of big block Chevys, it laid the foundation for an era of high-performance engines. It was an engine that Chevrolet may have downplayed but never truly tamed. One that delivered more power than they admitted and became one of the most iconic collectible engines of the muscle car era. So, why didn't the 396 Porcupine engine reach its full racing potential? The answer comes down to a mix of corporate decisions, NASCAR rules, and the rise of even bigger big blocks. In 1963, General Motors officially withdrew from factory-backed racing, implementing a self-imposed ban on motorsports involvement. This meant that instead of developing the 396 for all-out competition, Chevrolet focused on production-friendly versions that could be sold to the public. For GM, it was all about the bottom line, selling cars, not winning races. At the same time, NASCAR's homologation requirements made things even harder. To be eligible for racing, an engine had to be mass-produced and available in showroom cars. This meant that experimental, high-performance engines like the 396 Porcupine had little chance of making it to the track in large numbers. While Chevrolet's 427 big block found ways to thrive in NASCAR, the 396 was left in the shadows. As Chevrolet continued to push the boundaries of big block performance, the 396 was slowly overshadowed by larger and more powerful engines like the 427 and 454. These bigger engines offered more displacement, higher horsepower ratings, and greater potential for high-speed racing. By the late 1960s, the 396 was no longer the top dog. It had become a stepping stone to even greater things. Today, the Chevrolet 396 is remembered as one of the most legendary engines of the muscle car era. While the mystery surrounding the banned porcupine variant continues to fuel speculation, its true impact lies in its contribution to Chevrolet's big block family. The technology pioneered in the 396 helped pave the way for the iconic 427 and 454, influencing the evolution of high-performance engines for decades. Even though it never became the dominant force on the NASCAR circuit, the 396 earned its place as one of the most respected and collectible big blocks ever built. Somewhere, hidden in a dusty garage, buried in an old Chevelle, or locked away in a forgotten GM vault, the Porcupine engine is still out there. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it waiting for its next run.